right, here we go on a Tuesday. It is time to talk New York Giants football. Oh, wait a minute, Ed. I must change the atmosphere here. I'm sorry. I am delayed. I feel much better now.
Right. There you go.
Big Blue all around us. It is Ed Valentine. You see him right there from Big Ble View as we're talking all things Giants here. We're in the offseason, Ed, but, there is no offseason for football. I know you can see you're at the old camp. The old
yes, indeed.
Camp, all right, just hanging out in some closet, having some fun, but nonetheless, football rolls on. We continue to do things, and OTAs, rookie camp has already happened. We've got people introducing presidents, so many things to get to today. Let's start with one on the football side of things, and that is Malik Nabers' health, because while we don't have doctors reporting in, we do have the head coach and the GM from time to time checking in. And the last time John Harbaugh spoke, it sounded like, all right, cool your jets here a little bit on Nabers. Maybe this thing is going to get into the regular season a bit, because Nabers had to have his knee redone or rescoped or cleaned out, as they say. What, if anything, do we know about this, and how optimistic are you that Malik Nabers will be on the field for game one?
Well, Jim, every time Joe Schoen or John Harbaugh speaks about this, I become less and less optimistic that Malik Nabers is going to start the season. I mean, that's just the reality of it. We heard Malik Nabers say way back in late December, early January, that this was a complicated knee surgery, that it's not just a clean ACL tear. There's meniscus damage. There's other damage. For John Harbaugh to say the other day that Nabers is in the middle of it in terms of his rehab, that tells you that he's not close to being ready to play football. He's not close to being ready to run routes during training camp and all of that. So for me, like I said, every time they speak, I become less and less optimistic, and I wouldn't be surprised by a scenario where it's week 4 or thereabouts before we see Malik Nabers play. I mean, week 4 would be a year from his surgery. And a couple of years ago, if you remember, Wan'Dale Robinson had knee surgery, and it was almost a year. It was almost a full year before we saw him. So I wouldn't be surprised if Nabers doesn't play the first quarter of the season. And again, that might change, but like I said, it's less and less optimistic every time somebody speaks about it. So don't count on seeing Malik, right away.
This is the Man Child Show with Boyd Green Digital at MC Show Digital. We are presented today by Northeast Roofing Professionals. You see their lovely logo right over the center of our screen there on top. And today's video brought to you by our friends at the Allen Floral Group, specifically the Floral Garden. So think about flowers. We always think about Mother's Day flowers. What about Dad? Maybe get some nice flowers. You can do that. June is coming up. June 21st, I think, is Father's Day. I'll be doing some special stuff with my son. So consider the gift of flowers or something else that they might have there at the Floral Gardens. All right, Ed Valentine, you wrote a piece the other day about, okay, well, let's presume for a moment here that the Malik Nabers recovery continues to be a slow, steady one, and games are to be missed. So perhaps there are some receivers out there that the Giants could still chase that are still free agents. Of course, we know about Odell Beckham Jr. We've heard all about him. We know him and John Harbaugh text regularly and apparently are pen pals. But in the meantime, there are some other guys, and you threw a list of 6 together. So tell us about that list you threw together, and are there better options in your mind out there than Odell Beckham Jr.?
Oh, Jim, I don't know if there are better options than Odell. What I do know about Odell is that part of the reason why I'm not a big fan of the idea of bringing in Odell is the fact that I think there would be outsized expectations for Odell. I think that fans get a romantic notion about players. There are still going to be people, if the Giants sign Odell Beckham, there are still going to be people who think Odell Beckham's a 1,200 or 1,400 yard receiving season kind of guy. And he's not that guy. He's a guy that would probably walk in as the fourth or fifth wide receiver on the roster. Guy who won't help you on special teams, which you'd hope a guy down that far in the depth chart would. Guy who is going to command a lot of attention from the fan base and the media, more attention than a guy who's the quote unquote fifth wide receiver on a roster should. And we don't know what kind of player he still is. John Harbaugh said the other day, I think he can make an NFL roster, but questioned whether he can actually make an impact on an NFL roster and whether he can be more than just a body, just a guy on a roster. So I just think for me, there's a whole lot that goes with Odell that might work against signing him. Some of the guys that I put on that list, Deebo Samuel, Deebo Samuel's not what he used to be, but he's still out there. He had more than 700 receiving yards a season ago. He's still a good player. DeAndre Hopkins, I mentioned, I'm not real big on that one, but I mentioned that only because he played for Harbaugh a year ago. Really interesting one for me, if he still wants to play, is former Giant Sterling Shepard. All right, because we all thought Sterling Shepard was done after 2023. I think he caught 10 balls. The Giants barely let him off the bench. He decided to go play with former college teammate, Baker Mayfield in Tampa Bay, and he's had 2 productive seasons in a row. I think it would be a nice story. It would be a nice cap to his career if he wanted to play, and he came back and he had a fairly productive season, with the Giants. I mean, Juju Smith-Schuster is still out there. So there are guys out there. There's nobody out there that can do what Malik Nabers can do. So that would be a definite loss. But when you just compare, for me, it's Odell Beckham and everything that comes with Odell Beckham versus what else is out there. And I'm not sure that you can't get a guy that can be as productive or more productive than Odell without the drama.
Mm-hmm. And do you think if Odell did come back to the Giants, would there be any drama? I mean, is this all been blown out of proportions? Has he matured? He is a mature man now. I mean, he's gotten older. Let's face that fact.
I don't know that there would be drama, per se, because I do agree with you. I think, he's not that same, kick the net guy that he was, so many years ago. My question is, and I think Harbaugh hinted at this a couple of weeks ago, Odell thinks he's still Odell, if you put it in all caps, okay? And Odell probably wants to come in and start and be a guy that gets a bunch of targets every week, and be a focal point. And I don't think John Harbaugh thinks he's that guy anymore. I don't think he's that guy anymore. Is Odell Beckham a guy who can come in and accept a part-time role, accept, a handful of targets every game or a handful of snaps every game where he might not even get targets? Can he accept that? And can he handle that role? That's the question. For me, that's a big question that has to get answered, because he's not going to be your number 1 or your number 2 wide receiver. Those days are gone.
And I have a guy on this roster that I want to ask you about way too early here. And I hope that he's going to be utilized in a certain way. But I think, and again, we all have our way too early predictions about who could pop on a team, who could surprise, who could outperform their prior statistics. And that guy on this roster for me offensively is Isaiah Likely. The Giants went out and spent a lot of money to get this guy. I think he is a tremendously untapped potential guy that could be like a massive goal line threat for the Giants, the outlet guy for Jaxson Dart. I just see a lot of potential in this guy, and I saw it before he came to the Giants. So this is not seeing something through blue-colored glasses. This is something I saw when we was with the Baltimore Ravens, but unfortunately he was behind a starting tight end who got most of the attention when it came to passes. So give me your thoughts about what kind of impact do you expect Isaiah Likely to have on the Giants' 2026 season?
Well, I think I agree with you that there's a lot of untapped potential with Isaiah Likely, and John Harbaugh agrees as well. Mark Andrews is a terrific player, number one tight end in Baltimore, and Likely was not going to surpass him. Look, the Giants didn't give Isaiah Likely 3 years and $40 million based on what Isaiah Likely did in Baltimore. They gave him that money based on what they think he can do in New York, based on the fact that they think there's a lot more meat on the bone, that they think there's a whole lot more that Isaiah Likely can accomplish. This is going to come off as criticism of Theo Johnson. Theo Johnson's a big, strong, fast, talented guy, but Theo Johnson was a 4th-round pick in the draft a couple of years ago because most NFL analysts thought that he was a big, athletic guy who could make a splash occasionally, but was really an NFL tight end too, really a backup kind of guy. Okay. And the reality of it is, I think that's what he's shown in his first 2 years. He can make a splash, but he drops too many passes. He's a little bit unreliable. And you're looking at a guy in Isaiah Likely who, if you look at his drop rates are very, very low throughout his career. He could be a guy that the Giants use not only inline, but he could be a big slot. He could actually be the replacement for Wan'Dale Robinson. I don't know that he's going to catch 100 passes, but I think the Giants are probably hoping that his production goes from 30 to 40 in Baltimore to, say, 60 with the Giants. I think that's what they'd probably be looking for, because those are the kind of numbers that would justify the money that they gave him. And I do think that's what they see.
Talking with Ed Valentine, Big Ble View. It's our Inside the Giants segment, Man-Child Show with Boy Green Digital at MC Show Digital. This our YouTube link right there. Please like the video on the way in if you enjoy what you're hearing. And also don't forget to subscribe to our channel, youtube.com/at MC Show Digital. You have to be on that channel and hit the subscribe button in order to become a subscriber. We are closing in, Ed, on our 1-year anniversary, and we're looking pretty good that we're going to get to 1,000 subscribers by the time we get to 1 year. So we're very excited about that. So tell your friends, tell your neighbors, have them click that subscribe as we march towards 1,000 subscribers. All right, we are presented today by our friends at Northeast Roofing Professionals. Today's video brought to you by our friends at the Allen Floral Group, specifically the Floral Gardens. Let's take a moment to hear from our sponsors, and then we're back more with Ed Valentine from Big Ble View, talking Giants right after this.
Finding the right local roofing company can be tricky. You don't want to hire the wrong roofers, or you could end up spending a fortune on repairs. The pros at Northeast Roofing Professionals can ensure your home is protected by a strong and sturdy roof. Locally owned and operated, over 30 years experience, free estimates, and competitively priced. Don't settle for an inexperienced roofing contractor. Turn to Northeast Roofing Professionals. Discounts for military and first responders. Reach out and let them put a sturdy roof over your head. NERPCNY.com. NERPCNY.com.
All right, it's the Man-Child Show with Boy Green Digital at MC Show Digital. We're talking with Ed Valentine as we're inside the Giants from Big Ble View. Ed, there's always concerns, of course, with every team, roster concerns, players that you wonder how are they going to fit in, especially with a new coach coming in the fold. So let's talk about a player that we spent some time last season in our weekly conversations talking about, and now he has, I guess, a chance at rebirth, a chance to continue to improve. And I want to talk to you about John Michael Schmidt and how he fits in. He's the center of this Giants offensive line. There are a lot of thoughts out there that maybe he's not going to be the guy here down the road, but he's only entering his third season. I know when the Giants drafted him a few years ago, they were pretty excited about him, and it's been a kind of a slow, steady progression for the young man. Let's talk about how he fits into this offensive line.
Well, of course, there was all the offseason chatter about Tyler Linderbaum, about the Giants going out and trying to sign Linderbaum, and the price tag got crazy, and the Giants bowed out of that. I understand the criticism of John Michael Schmitz, but it's also one of those things where he had a really rough, really rocky rookie season. And sometimes what happens is a narrative sort of takes hold and just never lets go. Every time a guy makes a mistake, people remember that player that he was as a rookie, and just, he stinks. All right. Well, John Michael Schmitz doesn't stink. Okay. But maybe a little bit like Kayvon Thibodeau, the 5th overall pick in 2022. Kayvon Thibodeau, for example, has been a good player, good run defender, good player, had one really good season, 11 and a half sacks, but he hasn't been the great player that he was billed as, that he was expected to be. When the Giants drafted John Michael Schmitz, it was, we've got our 10-year answer at center, okay? And entering year 4, we're still not sure about that. Now, John Michael Schmitz, if you look at all of the advanced analytics, year over year, John Michael Schmitz has gotten better each year of his career. Can he continue that? Because I would say that what he's risen to at this point is an adequate, average NFL center. Is that good enough? Can you do better than that? You can do worse, but can you do better? And I think that's what the Giants are going to have to be asking themselves, at the end of this upcoming season is average enough? And, because that's pretty much that, unless he has an astonishing leap in year 4, that's pretty much where he's settling in, is as an average NFL center.
Now they're adding a piece here, Ed, and they picked him up with that 10th overall pick, that bonus pick they got for trading Dexter Lawrence. Let's talk about Francis Mauigoa and the fact that he is, at least initially, going to play guard for this team. He has been billed in college as a tackle, but a versatile tackle, so they're going to play him at guard. Give me your thought about how he fits in. He's a player I'm really excited about. I loved what he had to say at the draft. I kind of love the whole American Samoan feeling about him. He's kind of a beast. He's going to die for his quarterback, right? Give me your thoughts about Mauigoa and what you expect from him. He's a rookie, so rookies, you got to temper yourself a little bit, but I'm pretty darn excited about this guy.
And I don't blame you for being excited. Look, I talked to John Feliciano, former NFL offensive lineman, played a year for the Giants. Feliciano and Mauigoa trained together this past offseason for a couple of months. And what Feliciano told me was, look, as soon as the Giants see Francis Mauigoa play guard, they will never, ever move him to tackle. All right. He will be that good as a guard in the NFL. And, maybe that's hyperbole, but I think there's a chance that that's also correct. He is a big, strong people mover. He's a guy they haven't had that kind of presence inside for a while. And so we'll see how it plays out. But like you, I'm optimistic about that. I think that the Giants' offensive line was better a year ago than it's been for a while. But what the Giants haven't had are enough guys who can just take the guy in front of them and push them backwards. And Maui Noah has the potential to be that kind of player. So we'll see how it works out. But I'm optimistic about him at guard. And like I said, if he's as good as advertised in there, we may never see him play tackle.
Yeah, it beckons me back, Ed, to that draft where Quentin Nelson was available. And there was a lot of talk about the Giants maybe going that way. And the thought was, oh, he's a guard. You don't draft a guard that high. But, I think in the end, we'll see how the career finishes. But Quentin Nelson, when healthy, has been one of the best players at that position in the NFL. And it's always good to have the best at any position.
Absolutely.
Yeah, good player. All right, a couple other things I want to get to with you today. One is kind of a nice touchy-feely story. Brian Burns is out there trumpeting for autism awareness and running some events and raising some money. Tell us about what's going on with Burnsy.
Well, he's been doing a lot for autism awareness. He was honored at the NFL Gridiron Gala for that. He will be the headline sponsor for a charity softball game this weekend in Pomona, New York, where a lot of current Giants and former Giants will be on the field, participating and raising money for charity. Burns is a guy who, the more we learn about Brian Burns and what he does off the field, not to mention the stand-up guy he is in the locker room, the more we learn. I always say that doing what I do on a day-to-day basis, you really can't root for teams, but you certainly root for players. You certainly look at players and say, it's amazing. Brian Burns has never played on a winning team. He's never been to the playoffs. And he's a guy who certainly deserves it. He's a guy that as far as we can see, no one's perfect, but he's a pro. He tries to do things right. He tries to use his platform to help people, to raise money for charity. Nothing but respect for the man. And if you're anywhere near Pomona, New York on Saturday, head out to the softball game. It'll be a fun time.
Brian Burns, good guy. He's really proven to be a good guy for the Giants. I know they paid him a lot of money, but certainly the performance was up, and I like the fact that this guy does stuff off the field. Speaking of off-the-field activities, a very, very interesting one happened this week. I don't want to get into the politics of it, Ed. I know you already got your head down, and so do I. But that, of course, is the Jaxson Dart introduction of President Trump at one of his rallies, and then Abdul Carter firing off something on social media that was somewhat of a meteor and has the entire press corps essentially talking about whether or not there's a division in the Giants locker room, a locker room which really hasn't even completely come together yet because we haven't even had our first training camp practice, nonetheless our first game altogether. But it was an interesting choice by Dart. It certainly was an interesting decision by Carter to go public rather than to do this privately. If he indeed had some issues, maybe it would have been better privately done. It sounds like the two have talked. Harbaugh seems to think this thing is settled, but it certainly raised the ire of many out there. Give me your thoughts on the whole escapade, and could it have been avoided? Was one person at fault? Was everyone at fault? What would you say about this whole incident here?
Look, before we taped this segment, I was working on a post about the whole situation. All right. I've been trying to decide for days whether I actually wanted to write about it and how I wanted to write about it. And I finally decided that I had to. And one of the things that people will read in that post is a line that says, "Lord, I miss the days when Eli Manning was the quarterback of the Giants." All right. Look, Eli Manning made a conscious decision to make headlines only as the quarterback of the New York Giants, only about football, only about what he did and failed to do on the football field. And he managed to do that for 16 years. All right. We're looking at a different generation of people now. Do I think Jaxson Dart made a mistake? Yeah, I do. But that's his mistake to make. All right. His political beliefs are his political beliefs. Whatever Abdul Carter believes is what Abdul Carter can believe. We live in a generation now where these young people have grown up putting their entire lives online.
Yep.
No, they haven't done anything if they haven't put it on Instagram. Okay.
It's like you don't exist, right?
You don't exist if you don't put your entire life on Instagram. So it doesn't surprise me that Jaxson Dart would say yes when he's invited to introduce Donald Trump. All right. If he's a Donald Trump supporter, you know, what surprises me is that somebody in his circle wouldn't say, Jaxson, you know, this would be better if you stayed out of it, because it's going to cause exactly what it caused.
Yeah. I think
And
just jump in here for a second, Ed. It's interesting to me because there have been presidents that I have liked and not liked as much based on mostly their policies and the way they handled, you know, government affairs and things that affected me personally as a human being or my family or my neighborhood or whatever it was. But I think if I were ever asked, and I know I'm not a famous person in that regard, if I were ever asked, hey, could you introduce the president? Whether it was Jimmy Carter, whether it was Ronald Reagan, whether it was, you know, Dwight D. Eisenhower, you know, I would have been like, yeah, I'm in, you know, I'll introduce the president. That's like a once in a lifetime opportunity. It's just interesting in today's world because it's this president that it becomes this incredible lightning rod thing that starts defining us as human beings in terms of our values because of the way that this guy has operated in that seat as president of the United States. That's the crazy part of it all, because I think in the spirit of just doing something that's kind of different and fun and say, hey, you know, I once introduced the president. It's kind of a nice, cool thing. You know, aren't too many people in the world who have gotten to say that and do that. So in a way, I kind of feel bad for Jaxson Dart.
Yeah.
That maybe his intention was, you know, pure in some way, that I just
Sure.
hey, I get the chance to introduce the president. Why would I say no? But it's because it's this president. That's what makes it.
Well, not only that, one of the things in the piece that I'm writing is the fact that I would have said, look, if he was introducing Barack Obama, I probably would have told him probably to stay away from that too.
Right.
It's just because everything in this world today is a lightning rod, and everything is so politically divided and morally divided, and people are so dug in, and nobody can talk to you can't talk to each other about your differences because people just wind up yelling at each other and accusing each other of being morons. He's perfectly within his rights to support whoever he wants to support, but it probably, the whole thing would have been avoided had he not done this. But back to the whole generational thing. What was Abdul Carter's first thought? Respond online.
Yeah, right.
Because that's what that generation does. They go right to their phone and they type out whatever thought happens to be in their brain. You know, but my thing is, look, the reality of it is NFL locker rooms have always had, you know, you've got 50, 60, 70, 90, 100 guys with coaches and everything else. You've always had Democrats in the room. You've always had Republicans in the room. You've had great people in the room. To be brutally honest about it, you've had rapists in the room. You've had criminals in the room. You've had really bad people in the room. All right. The New England Patriots had Aaron Hernandez in the room. All right. But they won a lot of football games while he was in the room. All right. You've got people of all different kinds of religions and from all different walks of life. Their job is to put all of that aside and go practice every day and go to the football field on whatever day of the week Roger Goodell tells them to go to the football field now. And I would say Sunday, except it's hardly ever Sunday anymore.
Right.
But their job is to put all of that aside. And NFL teams have been doing that for generations now. Pro sports teams have been doing that for generations. They figure out a way to put their differences aside and focus on the one thing that they're there to do on game day, which is play and try to win. I hope if anything, like I said, everybody's entitled to their own beliefs. But I do hope that Jaxson learns that maybe certain things are better left untouched. These kids are. When I look at Eli Manning, I mentioned him a couple minutes ago. Eli's a celebrity now. Okay, he didn't try to be a celebrity when he was a football player. A lot of these guys try to do both right now. They try to be a big personality as well as be a football player, and they try to do everything for their brand, and they try to promote themselves, and they make a big show about going to the Kentucky Derby and about being in this place or that place. And sometimes that stuff is just counterproductive, but it's very difficult. You and I are a lot older than these young men, and it's just, I don't want to be an old, stodgy, I don't want to be, the get off my lawn guy. But sometimes it's difficult to tell these kids that sometimes it's better to let those things go in the short term.
Yeah, no question about it, Ed. Very well said, and a perfect ending, I think, to our little soiree today. Ed Valentine, as always, my friend, appreciate you joining us. I'm sure we'll talk to you in the upcoming weeks. Good to check in with you. Enjoy the little summer home, and enjoy some of that nice fresh air that you get up there in the Adirondacks, my friend.
Yeah, maybe next time I'll drag my green screen all the way up here to the Adirondacks, so we don't have to look at my lovely background.
I love the closet effect. It's really cool. It just makes me feel like it's the Adirondacks. I kind of do.
I am basically in a closet.
All right, there he is, Ed Valentine from Big Ble View.